Twilight Princess is without a doubt an amazing game. It's one of the darker themed Zelda games, and its story is probably one of the seemingly darkest as well. But Nintendo's decision to release the game as a kick-off title for the Wii might not have been the smartest idea. At least not from the very beginning. And looking at it a little closer, it could be that the option to release it on the Wii was added later. The game itself was preferred on the GameCube by most, which got harder and harder to acquire eventually. In America and Europe, the price even rose as high as $60 for a used copy of the game on the Nintendo GameCube. But this doesn't make the time of the release any worse. Releasing a game on an older platform makes it more accessible after all. But why would we go as far and claim that Twilight Princess was released at the wrong time? After the backlash Nintendo got of the Wind Waker in 2002, they tried to listen to what their fans had to say. Every Zelda game before the Wind Waker was set to use the console's maximum graphical capabilities. The 3D Zeldas before the Wind Waker all had a rather dark and serious mood as well. So it's just obvious that people wanted to get their old-style Zelda games back. So Nintendo gave in. In 2006, they released their new Zelda game, Twilight Princess. And just looking at the trailers back then, it was gorgeous. The dark mood was back. The story started out happy, but turned pretty dark after a while, and the entire game had a serious theme. Nothing of the seemingly childish setting that the Wind Waker tried to go for was seen.
And yet, Nintendo forgot about a few crucial things, one of the biggest being nostalgia. When Ocarina of Time was released in 1997, the game was a huge hit and Nintendo managed to pull off an almost perfect jump from 2D to 3D. The controls felt good, the target system was innovative and worked like a charm. Comparing it with the way 3D games worked back then, outstanding is even an understatement. Just looking at how other 3D games still struggled with figuring out how to manage controls properly, Ocarina of Time had that down like it never did anything else before. But for Twilight Princess, that comparison doesn't work anymore. In 2006, most 3D games had their controls down. So from a technical standpoint, Twilight Princess just couldn't get that wow effect anymore. But it doesn't stop there. Obviously, if we're talking about nostalgia, we should actually try and address this point as well. With Ocarina of Time, Nintendo managed to speak to an audience that just barely got into playing video games. And while that could count for Twilight Princess as well, thanks to how the market looked back then, there were no real competitors except the PlayStation to the N64. So children whose first Zelda game was Ocarina of Time obviously tend to keep that one in their mind as the best one, cause they had no other Zelda game to compare to. Just to prove a point. Same goes for people whose first Zelda game was A Link to the Past or, well, whatever that may be. People tend to like the game that made them fall in love with the franchise the most, and that's almost always the first one they play. So the fans were expecting an experience that was comparable to possibly their first Zelda game they ever played, which obviously they couldn't live up to as the game just couldn't deliver this first time experience. They played another Zelda game before this one after all. But that's not everything, obviously. We don't know whether Twilight Princess was originally designed for the Nintendo GameCube or not. Due to the architecture of the Nintendo Wii's purpose of natively being able to support GameCube games, it could be that it was designed with the idea of a release on both consoles in mind. However, it can be assumed that it was primarily developed for the Nintendo GameCube. Obviously, Link is left-handed in the GameCube version, but we wouldn't really pick that up as an argument. Back in the GameCube era, Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft sort of had a console battle. Microsoft brought in their new Xbox with crazy good hardware, but it sort of drowned due to the lack of exclusive games besides Halo. With Nintendo and Sony being the only real competitors, it makes it look like Nintendo tried to display the real potential of the Nintendo GameCube with Twilight Princess. Despite the hardware of the Nintendo GameCube being stronger than the one in the PlayStation 2, the GameCube sold way less units. Looking at how Twilight Princess was made, it looks like it was a desperate attempt of, look at how strong our hardware is, disguised as, this is exactly what our fans asked for. Without any doubt, it can be said that Nintendo tried to point out how good they can make their games look. And while the game definitely does look really good compared to most games from the 2002 to 2004 era, 2006 was definitely not the right time to do so.
As Twilight Princess released, Sony and Microsoft already had their new consoles on the market. Their new power beasts with DirectX 9, shader model 3, multi-core processors, and a lot of disk storage for their games. And that's mostly where Nintendo missed their target. Back in the N64 days, one of the biggest features in Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask was that the textures didn't seem blurry. Everything you would see seemed sharp. This was hardly seen anywhere graphically at the time. A lot of games just looked bad compared to those two games. Heck, Majora's Mask even had motion blur. Nintendo was ahead of their time in almost all aspects. And looking at Twilight Princess, it is almost too obvious that Nintendo tried to do the same once again by maxing out what the GameCube had to offer. And it does make sense, but it would have made way more sense if they did this earlier. Showing graphics on way outdated hardware that isn't even capable of outputting an HD signal in a time period where HD was the new crazy trend is sort of underwhelming. Obviously, releasing Twilight Princess before the Wind Waker could have led to an even bigger backlash and could have led to Skyward Sword just not happening at all. But looking at how Nintendo tried to deliver a graphically amazing yet dark game to remind people that they can still live up to their golden days would have made way more sense if they had done this earlier. After the development started, they probably realized that it isn't going to work out as they originally planned, and pushed back the release a little to match the launch of the Wii to boost the sales. Which at that time with that setting was probably the smartest thing to do. So as you can see, there's more behind the launch of Twilight Princess than we all thought. Thanks for watching everybody, I hope you enjoyed. If you want to watch more videos, click the annotations on the screen right now. And why not subscribe? Because way more videos are coming very soon.